My name's Emily, and I'm 32. Last Thanksgiving, I pulled up to my mom's house in Ohio Arms full of grocery bags, ready to cook our family dinner. The air smelled like fall, and I was humming thinking of our old traditions. I slipped into the kitchen unnoticed and froze. My sister Hannah was laughing with Mom. "She still doesn't know she's our cash cow," Hannah said. Mom chuckled. "She paid for the house, the car, and she's still useful." My heart cracked. I walked out silent. What would you do if trust shattered like that? Drop a like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I gripped the steering wheel, the Cleveland skyline blurring past my windshield. My chest felt tight, like someone had punched a hole through it. Hannah's voice echoed in my head, sharp and cold, calling me their cash cow. My mom's laugh stung worse, like a blade twisting. I turned off the radio, the silence louder than any song. How could they say that? After everything I'd done, the house, the car, the late nights working overtime to cover their bills. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my hands shaking so bad I could barely park straight. I checked my phone, hoping maybe I'd imagined it. 3 texts from Hannah glowed on the screen. "Hey, where'd you go? We need you for dinner prep. Then you okay?" And finally, "Call me." Her words looked so normal, like she hadn't just ripped my heart out. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button. Part of me wanted to scream at her demand answers, but what if she laughed it off? What if I was overreacting? I locked the phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat, my breath hitching. I thought about the past 5 years, how I'd poured everything into keeping our family afloat. When Mom lost her job after Dad died, I wired $50,000 for the down payment on her house. No questions asked. I was 27, scraping by, but I did it because she said it was temporary. Then Hannah needed a car to get to her new job, so I co-signed the loan, paid the first 20 grand myself. She hugged me, called me her hero. Was that all a lie? My stomach churned, and I pressed my forehead against the wheel, the cold leather grounding me. I needed to talk to someone, anyone. Sarah's name popped into my mind, my best friend since high school. She'd always been the one to pull me out of dark places. I dialed her number before I could second-guess myself. You okay?" she answered, her voice warm, but edged with worry. I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. "How do you say your family sees you as a walking ATM?" "Can I come over?" I managed my voice thinner than I wanted. "Course, get over here," she said. No hesitation. I started the car and drove the city lights streaking past like tears I refused to let fall. Sarah's duplex was 15 minutes away, tucked in a quiet neighborhood with Christmas lights already twinkling on porches. I parked, grabbed my purse, and headed to her door, my legs heavy. The weight of what I'd heard was sinking deeper, like sand filling my lungs. Sarah opened the door before I could knock, her curly hair pulled back, a dish towel slung over her shoulder. "You look like hell," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Her kids?" Mia and Noah were in the living room, stringing popcorn garlands for their Christmas tree. The smell of cinnamon and pine hit me, and for a second I wanted to crawl into that warmth and forget everything. "Sit," Sarah said, pointing to the couch. "What's going on?" I sank into the cushions, clutching my purse like a lifeline. Mia, 6 years old, ran over and shoved a glittery ornament in my hand. "Auntie M, help us," she squealed. I forced a smile, my throat tight. "In a minute, sweetie," I said, ruffling her hair. Sarah shooed the kids back to their task and sat across from me, her brown eyes searching mine. "Spill," she said, her voice soft but firm. I opened my mouth, but the words felt too big, too raw. "It's family stuff," I said, my voice cracking. Sarah leaned forward, her brow furrowing. What kind of family stuff? You're scaring me. I swallowed hard, my fingers twisting the strap of my purse. I heard something at Mom's. I started, then stopped. The image of Hannah's smirk, Mom's chuckle flashed in my mind. My eyes burned, but I blinked it away. They said things about me. Bad things. Sarah's face hardened. What things? She pressed her voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. I looked down at my hands, the nails bitten to the quick. They called me something I whispered. Like, I'm only good for money. Saying it out loud made it real, and my chest ached like it was caving in. Sarah's jaw dropped, and she reached for my hand, squeezing it. Emily, that's not okay. Who said that, Hannah? Your mom. I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. Shame crept in hot and heavy. Had I been so blind, so stupid to think they needed me, or worse, loved me? I don't know what to do. I admitted, my voice barely audible. Sarah's grip tightened. You don't have to do anything right now, she said. But you don't let them treat you like that. You're worth more than their damn bank account. Her words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the doubt clawing at me. What if I'd misunderstood? What if I confronted them and they turned it around, made me the villain? I glanced at the kids laughing as they draped tinsel on the tree. Their joy felt like a world I didn't belong to anymore. I just need to think, I said, standing up. Sarah frowned, but nodded. You stay as long as you want, she said, but promise me you'll talk when you're ready. I hugged her, the knot in my chest loosening just a fraction. As I stepped outside, the cold air stung my face, and I realized I hadn't cried yet. Not a single tear. Maybe I was too angry, or maybe I was too broken. I got in my car, my phone buzzing with another text from Hannah. You coming back tomorrow? It read all casual, like nothing had happened. I stared at it, my pulse pounding, and tossed the phone aside. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. I'd go, but not for them. I needed to see their faces to know if they meant it. I drove back to my apartment, the city's glow dimming as I wound through quieter streets. My phone buzzed again, Mom's name flashing. I let it go to voicemail, my stomach twisting. The thought of hearing her voice all sugary and fake made me want to scream. I parked and trudged up the stairs, the hallway's fluorescent light flickering like my thoughts. Inside, my place felt too small, the walls closing in. I dropped my purse and sank onto the couch, staring at the framed family photos on my shelf. Me, Hannah, Mom, and Dad at a lake house, all smiles. Was that ever real? I reached for my purse, rummaging for my keys, and my fingers brushed an old envelope, creased and soft, from years of being carried. Dad's handwriting stared back at me, my name scrawled in his messy script. I hadn't read it in ages, but I knew every word. He wrote it before the cancer took him when I was 22, telling me to always look out for Mom and Hannah to keep our family strong. I traced the ink, my throat tightening. Had I done too much because of this letter, or not enough? I set it down and grabbed my laptop, pulling up my bank account. My heart sank as I scrolled through years of transactions. There it was, $500 a month to Hannah labeled family support. I'd set it up after she lost her job, thinking it was temporary. How had I forgotten? Each transfer felt like a fresh cut, now proof I'd been blind. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. They'd taken so much, and I'd let them. The doorbell buzzed, sharp and sudden. I froze, half expecting Hannah or Mom ready to play innocent. I peered through the peephole and saw Marcus, my neighbor, holding a foil-covered plate. I opened the door, forcing a smile. "Hey, thought you might want some pumpkin pie," he said, his grin easy. "Made too much." His kindness hit me like a wave, and I took the plate, my hands unsteady. "Thanks, Marcus. That's really sweet." "You okay?" he asked, tilting his head. I nodded too quickly, my smile slipping. "Just a long day," I said, my voice thin. He didn't push, just gave a nod, and headed back to his place. I closed the door, the pie's warm scent filling the room, but I couldn't eat. I set it on the counter and sank back onto the couch, my mind spinning. Marcus's small gesture made me realize how alone I felt, how much I'd leaned on Mom and Hannah to fill that gap. My phone lit up with another voicemail from Mom. I played it, holding my breath. "Emily, honey, where are you? We're worried. Dinner's tomorrow. You're still coming, right?" Her tone was all concern, like she hadn't laughed at my expense. I deleted it, my fingers trembling. How could she sound so normal? I opened my texts, seeing Hannah's messages again, all cheerful and casual. My anger flared hot and sharp. They thought I'd just show up, smile, and keep paying their way. I stood and paced the floor, creaking under my steps. I wanted to call them, to yell until my voice gave out. But what would that solve? They'd deny it, or worse, make me feel guilty for being upset. I stopped by the window, staring at the streetlights below. A couple walked by, hand in hand, their laughter faint. I envied them, their ease, their trust. My family was supposed to be that for me, but now they felt like strangers. I grabbed a glass of water, my hands still shaky, and sat at my tiny kitchen table. The pie sat untouched, a reminder of Marcus's kindness, but it couldn't drown out the ache. I thought about Sarah's words, how I was worth more than their bank account. She was right, but it didn't make this hurt less. I'd given them everything, not just money, but my time, my heart. And they'd turned it into a joke. My phone buzzed again, another text from Hannah. "Hey, can you grab extra cranberry sauce for tomorrow?" TX. I stared at it, my blood boiling. She didn't even pause, didn't care that I'd vanished from Mom's house. They expected me to keep playing my role, the reliable sister, the dutiful daughter. I set the phone down, my resolve hardening. I'd go to Thanksgiving, but not to please them. I needed to see their faces to know if they'd look me in the eye and lie. I needed to know how deep this betrayal ran. I pulled into Mom's driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under my tires, doing nothing to calm my nerves. Thanksgiving dinner was hours away, but I'd come early, telling myself I needed answers. My hands gripped the grocery bags, cranberry sauce, extra stuffing, all the things Hannah asked for, like I was still their errand girl. The house looked the same, white siding and a faded wreath on the door. But it felt different now, like a stranger's place. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and walked inside. The smell of roasting turkey hit me, mixed with cinnamon from Mom's candles. Hannah was at the counter, chopping carrots, her hair tied back in a messy bun. Mom stood by the stove, stirring gravy, humming softly. "Emily." Hannah called, her smile too bright, like she was selling something. "You're a lifesaver with those groceries." Mom turned, her apron dusted with flour, and gave me a quick hug. "Glad you're here, honey," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes darting away too fast. I set the bags down, my throat tight. Their cheer felt like a performance, and I was the audience they thought they could fool. "Need help?" I asked, keeping my tone even though my pulse hammered. Hannah slid a cutting board toward me. "Can you dice these potatoes? We're behind." Her casualness stung, like she hadn't spent yesterday mocking me. I grabbed a knife, the blade cold in my hand, and started chopping, watching them from the corner of my eye. As I worked, Hannah launched into a story about her co-worker's holiday drama, her laugh loud and forced. Mom nodded along, tossing in comments about the neighbors' tacky Christmas lights. It was all so normal, so easy, and it made my skin crawl. How could they act like this? I thought of the 50 grand I'd given Mom for this house, the car payments I'd covered for Hannah. My knuckles whitened around the knife handle, and I forced myself to breathe. The doorbell rang, and Mom wiped her hands, heading to answer it. Hannah leaned closer, her voice dropping. So, Em, we were thinking about a family vacation next summer. Maybe Florida. You'd love it. Her eyes sparkled, but there was something calculated in them, like she was testing me. My stomach twisted. Florida's expensive, I said, keeping my gaze on the potatoes. She shrugged. Yeah, but you're good with money. You always figure it out. Her words landed like a slap. I set the knife down, my hands trembling. She didn't even blink, just kept chopping like she hadn't asked me to bankroll their fun. I wanted to call her out to ask if this was part of their cash cow plan, but the words stuck. Mom came back with our cousin Natalie, who carried a bottle of wine and a wide smile. Emily, you look amazing, Natalie said, pulling me into a hug. Thanks for always saving the day with this family. Her praise hit me hard, a mix of warmth and resentment. I forced a smile, but my eyes flicked to Hannah, who was suddenly very focused on her carrots. Did she feel guilty, or was she just annoyed Natalie was stealing her spotlight? Mom clapped her hands. Let's get this table set, girls, she said, bustling off. Natalie stayed by me, pouring wine and chatting about her new job. You're the glue, Em, she said, squeezing my arm. This family would fall apart without you. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. Glue, sure, but at what cost? I glanced at Hannah, who was now laughing with Mom in the dining room, setting out plates. They moved so easily, like nothing was wrong, while I felt like I was drowning. Natalie's kindness made it worse, highlighting how little Mom and Hannah valued me. I sipped the wine, the bitterness matching my mood, and followed them to help. As we arranged silverware, Hannah's husband Greg showed up, his boots loud on the hardwood. Hey, Emily, he said, smirking. Heard you're killing it at that fancy accounting job. Must be nice, all that cash. His tone was light, but it cut deep, like he was in on their joke. I froze, a fork in my hand, my heart pounding. It's just a job, I said, my voice tight. He chuckled, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Sure, but you're the one keeping this show running, right? I looked at Mom, hoping she'd say something, anything to shut him up. But she just smiled, stirring her gravy like his words were a compliment. Hannah giggled, tossing her hair. She's our rock, she said, but her eyes didn't meet mine. My anger flared hot and sharp, and I gripped the fork so hard my knuckles ached. They weren't just using me, they were proud of it, parading it like a badge. I wanted to scream, to flip the table and watch their fake smiles shatter. Natalie nudged me, her brow furrowed. You okay? She whispered, her voice low. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She didn't push, but her concern lingered, a small anchor in the storm inside me. I set the fork down, my hands unsteady, and excused myself to grab more napkins from the kitchen. Alone, I leaned against the counter, my breath shallow. Their voices drifted in all laughter and chatter, like I was invisible. I needed to hold it together, but every word they said was another crack in my heart. I stood in the kitchen, my hands pressed against the cool countertop, trying to steady my breathing. The laughter from the dining room grated on me, each chuckle a reminder of how easily they dismissed me. I grabbed a stack of napkins from the drawer, my fingers brushing against a crumpled credit card bill tucked beneath. Curious, I pulled it out, my eyes scanning the numbers. Jewelry, a spa day, a weekend in Miami. Thousands of dollars charged to a card I didn't recognize, but the address was Mom's. My heart thudded. Had I paid for this too? I stuffed the bill back, my mind racing. All those times Mom said she was struggling when I sent extra checks for her bills, were they for this? My face burned anger, mixing with a sickening sense of betrayal. I walked back to the dining room, napkins in hand, but my steps felt heavier, like I was wading through mud. The The table was almost set with Mom fussing over the centerpiece, a cluster of pumpkins and fake leaves. Hannah was showing Greg something on her phone, both of them grinning like kids. I set the napkins down, my movements mechanical. Natalie caught my eye, her smile fading slightly like she could sense the storm inside me. I looked away, not ready for her questions. Mom clapped her hands, breaking the moment. "Time to eat, everyone," she said, her voice bright like this was just another happy holiday. We shuffled to our seats, the clink of glasses and scrape of chairs filling the air. I sat between Natalie and Greg, my stomach too knotted to eat. Mom raised her wine glass, her eyes sweeping the table but skipping over me. "To family," she said, her voice warm. "To sticking together, no matter what." Everyone echoed her, their glasses clinking. But the words felt like a lie in my mouth. I sipped my wine, the taste sour, and glanced at Hannah. She was beaming, leaning into Greg like she hadn't a care in the world. How could she toast to family after what she said? My fingers tightened around my glass, the urge to shatter it growing. Natalie passed me the mashed potatoes, her hand brushing mine. "You sure you're okay?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over Greg's loud story about his new truck. I nodded, forcing a tight smile, but my chest ached. I wanted to tell her to spill everything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I scooped food onto my plate, staring at the golden turkey and cranberry sauce like they could anchor me. Hannah's voice cut through, sharp and playful. "So, Emily, you're still single, huh?" she said, leaning forward, her fork poised over her plate. "Must be nice, all that freedom and cash to yourself." Greg snorted, his laugh grating. "Yeah, no kids, no mortgage, just living the dream," he added, winking at me. My fork froze halfway to my mouth, my pulse roaring in my ears. It wasn't just a jab, it was a spotlight on their view of me, a wallet with legs. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to step in to say anything, but she just cut her turkey. Her lips curved in a faint smile. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I set my fork down, my hands trembling under the table. "It's not all freedom," I said, my voice low but steady. Hannah tilted her head, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Oh, come on, Em, you're doing great. We're all so proud." Her words dripped with sweetness, but they felt like poison. Proud of what? My bank account, my silence. Natalie shifted beside me, her knee bumping mine, a small gesture of support. "Let's talk about something else," she said. Her voice firm. She launched into a story about her brother's messy divorce. Her words filling the silence. I tried to listen, but my eyes kept drifting to Mom, who was now chatting with Greg about football, her laughter light. She hadn't looked at me once, not really. It was like I was invisible unless they needed something. The weight of it all. Hannah's smugness, Mom's indifference, Greg's jabs pressed down on me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I pushed my plate away, the food untouched, and stood. "I need some air," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Hannah's brow furrowed, but her concern felt rehearsed. "You okay, Em?" she asked, her tone too sweet. I didn't answer, just grabbed my coat and headed for the back door. Outside, the November chill hit me sharp and grounding. I leaned against the porch railing, my breath visible in the cold air. The backyard stretched out, bare trees silhouetted against the gray sky. I thought of Dad, how he'd sit out here with me, pointing out constellations, promising we'd always have each other. Now it was just me, and the family I'd fought for felt like a lie. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I couldn't, not yet. But the hurt was a living thing, clawing at my chest, and I didn't know how much more I could take. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a hammer against my skull. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every thought. I'd barely slept, my mind stuck on Mom and Hannah, their voices looping like a broken record. I dragged myself to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop. If I was going to face them again, I needed to know exactly what I'd been giving them. I logged into my bank account, my fingers hesitant, and started digging through years of statements. The numbers hit me like a freight train. Over 5 years, I'd sent Mom and Hannah more than $100,000. House payments, car loans, emergencies that were never explained. My savings account was a shadow of what it should have been, and I justified every withdrawal as family duty. I scrolled further, my heart pounding, and found something worse. A joint account with Hannah I didn't remember opening. Small transfers, $50 here, $100 there, siphoned off every month. My hands shook as I called the bank, my voice barely steady. The clerk's words were a punch to the gut. "Yes, Ms. Carter, your sister opened the account 3 years ago with your consent. The signature's on file." Consent? I'd never signed anything like that. My mind raced back to late nights at Mom's signing papers for her mortgage, Hannah sliding documents across the table with a smile. Had she slipped something else in? I thanked the clerk, hung up, and stared at the wall, my coffee growing cold. They hadn't just used me, they'd stolen from me. I was still reeling when my phone buzzed. Sarah's name flashed, and I answered, needing her voice to ground me. You okay? You left dinner so fast last night, she said, her worry clear. I took a breath, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. They've been taking my money, Sarah, for years. Hannah set up an account, forged my name. I found it this morning. Her gasp was sharp, followed by a string of curses. That's not family, that's theft, she said. You need to confront them. Now. I wanted to, but the thought of facing them made my stomach lurch. What if they denied it? What if they turned it around, made me feel like the bad guy? I don't know if I can. I admitted, my voice small. Sarah's tone softened, but stayed firm. You're stronger than you think, Em. Come over later. We'll figure it out. I promised I would, but as I hung up, doubt crept in. Could I really tear my family apart over this? I was about to close my laptop when an email pinged in my inbox, the subject line stopping me cold, regarding your father's trust. It was from a law firm in Cleveland, someone named Clara Bennett. My hands trembled as I opened it. The message was formal, mentioning a trust fund Dad had set up for me, one I'd never heard of. We need to discuss discrepancies, it read, with a request to call. My mind flashed to Dad's quiet talks about my future, his insistence I'd be taken care of. Had Mom and Hannah known about this too? Before I could process it, my phone rang. Hannah's name glaring on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something pushed me to pick up. You need to get to Mom's now, she said, her voice high and frantic. There are people here, men in suits asking questions. They're saying stuff about money, about you. What did you do? Her words were a jolt accusation laced with panic. My mouth went dry. I didn't do anything. I said, my voice sharper than I meant. Who are they? I don't know. Lawyers or something, she snapped. Just get here. She hung up, leaving me staring at the phone, my heart in my throat. Men in suits at Mom's house the day after I found their secret account. The email about Dad's trust loomed in my mind, a puzzle piece I didn't yet understand. I grabbed my keys, my pulse racing, and headed out the door. Whatever was happening, I was about to walk into the eye of the storm, and I wasn't sure I was ready. I sped toward Mom's house, the Cleveland streets a blur of gray and headlights. My hands gripped the wheel knuckles white as Hannah's frantic voice replayed in my head. Men in suits asking about money, about me. The email about Dad's trust burned in my mind, a shadow I couldn't shake. I pulled into the driveway, my car jerking to a stop behind a sleek black sedan. The front door was ajar, voices spilling out low and serious. My stomach churned, but I forced myself out of the car and up the steps. Inside the living room was a scene from a bad movie. 3 men in crisp suits stood by the coffee table, one holding a thick folder, another scribbling notes. Mom sat on the couch, her face, pale hands twisting a tissue. Hannah paced behind her, her eyes, wild hair falling loose from her bun. They both looked up as I entered, and the air shifted heavy with something worse than guilt. "Emily." Mom said, her voice tight. "You're here." One of the men, tall with graying hair, stepped forward. "Ms. Carter, I'm Clara Bennett's associate from Bennett and Associates. We're here about your father's trust fund." His tone was calm, professional, but it hit me like a thunderclap. Hannah stopped pacing, her gaze darting to Mom, who wouldn't meet my eyes. "What trust fund?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The man adjusted his glasses, glancing at his folder. "The one established for you, valued at $200,000. There's evidence of unauthorized withdrawals." My legs felt weak, like the floor was tilting. $200,000 meant for me, and I'd never known. I looked at Mom, waiting for her to explain, but she stared at her lap, her tissue shredding in her fingers. Hannah rushed toward me, her hands outstretched. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "We didn't mean to hurt you." I stepped back, my skin crawling at her touch. "Didn't mean to," I snapped, my voice rising. "You stole from me." The room went silent, the lawyers exchanging glances. Mom finally looked up, her eyes red but defiant. "It wasn't stealing," she said, her voice sharp. "We needed it, Emily. After your father died, we were drowning. You were fine. You had your job." Her words were a knife, twisting deep. "Fine. I'd worked 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, poured everything into them, and they thought I was fine." Hannah's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It was my idea," she choked out. "I told Mom we could use the trust just for a while. You were always so generous, we thought—" She trailed off, but the implication hung there heavy and ugly. They thought I wouldn't notice that I'd keep giving their endless cash cow. My chest tightened, each breath a struggle. I looked at the lawyers, their faces neutral, and felt exposed, like my pain was on display for strangers. Clara's associate cleared his throat. "The withdrawals were made through a joint account in your name, Ms. Carter, but the signatures don't match your records. We're launching an investigation and we'll need your statement." "My statement?" The words felt distant, unreal. I nodded, numb, as Hannah sank onto the couch, sobbing. Mom reached for her, murmuring comfort, but didn't spare me a glance. It was like I wasn't there, like I'd never been more than a means to an end. One of the lawyers, a younger man with kind eyes, spoke up. "I knew your father, Emily. He was my mentor at the firm. He talked about you all the time, how proud he was." His voice softened, and for a moment, I saw Dad's smile, his hand on my shoulder. But the memory shattered against the reality in front of me, Mom and Hannah unraveling their lies laid bare. The lawyer's kindness only made it worse, a reminder of what I'd lost, not just money, but the family I'd believed in. Hannah's sobs grew louder, and she looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please, Em, tell them it was a mistake," she begged. "We'll pay it back, I swear." Mom nodded, her face a mask of desperation. "We're family," she said, her voice cracking. "You can't let this tear us apart." Their words were a weight pressing me down, demanding I save them again. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My heart was a raw, bleeding thing, and all I could feel was the ache of their betrayal, sharp and unending. I left Mom's house in a daze, the lawyer's words and Hannah's sobs echoing in my ears. The drive back to my apartment was a blur, streetlights smearing like paint across my windshield. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from fear anymore, but from a fire starting to burn inside me. They'd taken everything, my money, my trust, Dad's legacy, and expected me to keep quiet, to keep giving. I wasn't going to let them anymore. I couldn't. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, a notepad in front of me, coffee untouched. Clara Bennett's card lay beside it, her name in crisp black font. I dialed her number, my heart pounding but steady. "Ms. Carter?" She answered, her voice calm and professional. "I was hoping you'd call." I took a breath, the weight of yesterday still heavy, but no longer crushing. "I want to know my options," I said. "About the trust fund, the account, all of it." Clara was direct, laying out the facts like a roadmap. The trust fund, $200,000 meant for me at 30, had been drained over years, funneled through the joint account Hannah set up. Forged signatures, unauthorized transfers. It was fraud, plain and simple. "You can freeze their accounts pending investigation," Clara said. "It's a strong first step, but it means legal action. Are you ready for that?" I hesitated, picturing Mom's tear-streaked face, Hannah's desperate pleas. Then I remembered Dad's letter, his hope for me to stand strong. "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Let's do it." She emailed me documents to sign, and I printed them, my hands steady now. Each signature felt like a brick in a wall. I was building one to protect myself. I scanned and sent them back, my resolve growing with every click. Clara promised to file by noon, locking Mom and Hannah's accounts until the investigation sorted things out. It wasn't revenge, it was justice, and I was done feeling guilty for wanting it. I needed perspective, someone who'd understand without pushing me. I called Natalie, my cousin, who'd seen the tension at Thanksgiving. She agreed to meet at a diner near her place, a small spot with red booths and the smell of frying bacon. I got there first, sliding into a seat by the window, the morning light casting long shadows across the table. Natalie arrived, her coat dusted with snow flurries, and hugged me tight. "You look different," she said, studying me. "Stronger." I told her everything, the trust fund, the forged account, the lawyers at Mom's. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with anger. They did what she said, her voice low but fierce. She leaned back, shaking her head. "I cut off my brother last year for less than that. He kept borrowing money, never paid it back, always had excuses." I finally said enough. Her story hit close, a mirror to my own pain. "How'd you do it?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Set boundaries without breaking." She sipped her coffee, her eyes distant. It hurt, but I realized I was worth more than his lies. "You are too, Em?" Her words settled in me, solid and true. I told her about freezing their accounts, and she nodded, a small smile breaking through. "That's a start. Don't let them guilt you into backing down." I felt a spark of pride, the first in days, like I was reclaiming something they'd tried to steal. Back at my apartment, I opened my banking app, my fingers hovering over the monthly transfer to Hannah. $500 every month like clockwork. I thought of her smile when I'd set it up, her promise to pay me back soon. My jaw tightened, and I hit the button to cancel it, the confirmation screen, a small victory. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a line drawn in the sand. I closed the app, my breath easier, and felt something shift inside me, a strength I hadn't known I had. Oh. I sat at my desk, the glow of my laptop screen casting shadows across the room. Clara's email had come through confirming the account freeze, but I needed more than legal steps to feel whole again. I called Lucas, an accountant I'd met through Sarah, who specialized in financial audits. His voice was steady, professional, as I explained the joint account and the trust fund mess. "I need to know the full scope," I said, my tone resolute. "Every dollar they took, every lie." He agreed to dig into my records, promising a report by the end of the week. While waiting, I felt restless, like I was finally waking up from a long sleep. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to Hannah's number, my thumb hovering over the call button. My heart raced, But this wasn't about yelling or begging for answers, it was about reclaiming my voice. I hit call, and she picked up on the second ring, her voice wary. What's going on? I took a breath, my words measured. I know about the trust fund, Hannah. The account, the forgeries, all of it. I'm done being your bank. There was a long pause, then a shaky exhale. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said, her voice small. We were desperate, I swear. Her excuses felt like sandpaper on my skin, but I didn't waver. You don't get to decide what hurts me, I said. This stops now. I hung up before she could respond, my hands trembling, but my chest lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. That evening, Sarah invited me to her place for dinner, a quiet gathering with her husband Tom and a couple of their friends. I almost said no, wanting to hide in my apartment, but something pushed me to go. Her dining room was warm, lit by candles, the table crowded with pasta and laughter. I shared what I'd done, freezing the accounts, calling Hannah, and the table went quiet, their eyes on me, not with pity, but with respect. You're taking your life back, Tom said, raising his glass. I smiled, the warmth of their support sinking in a balm to the raw edges of my heart. Back home, I pulled out a notebook and started writing a letter to Mom. Not to send, not yet, but to get the words out, the ones I'd swallowed for years. I wrote about the house payments, the car, the trust fund, how their betrayal cut deeper than any knife. I wrote about Dad, how he'd believed in us, and how I was fighting to honor that now. The pen moved faster, my words spilling out raw and unfiltered. When I stopped, pages filled, I felt unburdened, like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself they'd tried to erase. The next day, Lucas called with his initial findings. You're not going to like this, he said, his voice grim. He'd found a credit line opened in my name tied to a boat Hannah had bought last year, docked at a marina I'd never visited. The debt was $20,000 payments drawn from my accounts without my knowledge. My stomach dropped, but my anger was cold now, focused. Can we prove it was her? I asked. Lucas confirmed the signatures were forged, clear evidence of fraud. File it with Clara, I said, my voice steady. I want it all on record. I stood by my window, looking out at the city lights, the world moving on, despite the chaos inside me. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from Mom, her voice sharp and accusing. Emily, how could you do this to us? Freezing our accounts, dragging lawyers into it. We're your family. I deleted it without listening to the rest. My jaw tight. Her words didn't sting anymore. They just fueled me. I turned away from the window, my eyes catching on the notebook, the letter to Mom still open. I closed it gently, my fingers lingering on the cover, a quiet promise to myself that I was done being their shadow. I stepped into the Cleveland courthouse, the marble floors echoing under my boots. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old paper. Clara had warned me the preliminary hearing would be quick, just a first step, but my stomach knotted as I took my seat. Across the room, Mom and Hannah sat side by side, their faces drawn, eyes fixed on the table in front of them. They didn't look at me, not once, and that silence cut deeper than any words could have. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled tight, called the session to order. Clara stood, her voice clear, as she laid out the case: fraud, embezzlement, unauthorized withdrawals from my trust fund, and a forged credit line for a boat. She presented bank records, Lucas's audit, and witness statements, each piece a brick in the wall I'd started building. I watched Mom's hands clench, Hannah's shoulders hunch, but they stayed quiet, their lawyer scribbling notes furiously. Clara called Natalie to the stand, and I held my breath. My cousin walked forward, her steps steady, her face calm but resolute. She swore in her voice, even as she described Hannah's spending sprees, designer bags, weekend trips, things I'd never seen but paid for. She'd joke about Emily's generosity. Natalie said, her eyes flicking to me, but it wasn't gratitude. It was entitlement. Hannah's head snapped up, her glare sharp enough to slice through steel. But Natalie didn't flinch. I felt a swell of gratitude mixed with the ache of knowing my family's cracks were now public. The judge asked clarifying questions, her tone neutral, but each answer tightened the noose around Mom and Hannah. Clara submitted the forged signatures blown up on a screen for all to see, my name scrawled in Hannah's looping script next to purchases I'd never approved. I stared at the screen, my throat tight. It wasn't just money they'd taken. It was my trust, my future pieces of Dad's love for me. The room felt smaller, the air harder to breathe. When Clara finished, the judge leaned forward, her gaze sweeping the room. Based on the evidence, I'm ordering restitution of $150,000 to Ms. Emily Carter, she said, her voice firm. The defendant's accounts remained frozen pending further investigation. A murmur rippled through the room, but I barely heard it. 150,000. It was real now, a number that made their betrayal undeniable. My hands trembled in my lap, relief warring with a hollow sadness. I'd won, but at what cost? Mom's head bowed, her hands covering her face. Hannah's eyes were red, but she didn't cry, just stared at the table like it could swallow her whole. I waited for them to look at me to show some sign of regret, but they didn't. The judge adjourned the session, and people began to move chairs, scraping voices rising. I stayed seated, my body heavy, like the victory had anchored me to the chair. As the room cleared, a woman approached me, her face lined with years and kindness. I was a juror, she said softly, her voice low. I lost my sister to something like this. Money tears families apart, but you did the right thing. Her words were a lifeline, unexpected and warm, but they couldn't fill the void where my family used to be. I knotted my throat too tight to speak, and she squeezed my arm before walking away. I stood, gathering my bag, and felt a presence behind me. Greg, Hannah's husband, loomed there, his face, red eyes narrow. You happy now? He said, his voice low and bitter. You've ruined them, Emily. Hope it was worth it. His words were a slap, but I didn't flinch. I met his gaze, my heart pounding, and said nothing. He turned and stormed off, his boots loud against the floor. I watched him go, the weight of his anger settling on me, a reminder that this wasn't over. My family was unraveling, and I was the one holding the thread, unsure if I'd pulled too hard. I walked out of the courthouse, the winter air biting my cheeks, and headed to a coffee shop a few blocks away. My hands were still unsteady, Greg's words lingering like a bruise. Sarah and Lucas were waiting for me tucked into a corner booth, the hum of conversation and clinking mugs a soft backdrop. I slid in across from them, my coat still on like I needed its weight to hold me together. Sarah's eyes searched mine. How'd it go? She asked, her voice gentle but eager. I exhaled, the words coming slow. The judge ordered them to pay back $150,000. Their accounts are frozen. Sarah's face lit up, her hand reaching for mine. Em, that's huge. You did it. Lucas nodded, his smile quieter but proud. We're recovering part of the trust fund too, he added. I've tracked down some assets they tried to hide. Their support was a warmth I hadn't expected, but it didn't erase the ache in my chest. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. They didn't even look at me, I said, my voice low. Mom and Hannah, they just sat there. Sarah's smile faded, her grip tightening. They're ashamed, she said. They should be, but shame wasn't what I'd seen in their faces. It was something colder, like I'd become a stranger. I thought of the juror's kind words, her story of loss, and wondered if this was my future, a family reduced to memories and regrets. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived at my apartment, Mom's handwriting on the envelope, neat but shaky. I hesitated, then opened it, the single page unfolding like a confession. Emily. I'm sorry, it began, but the rest was a tangle of excuses. Dad's death, her debts, Hannah's pressure. We never meant to hurt you, she wrote, but the words felt hollow like a script she thought I'd buy. I tore the paper in half, my hands steady, and let the pieces fall into the trash. Her apology wasn't for me, it was for her. My phone pinged with an email from Hannah, subject line blank. Can we talk? It read, just you and me, please. I know I messed up. My thumb hovered over the reply button, a flicker of hope battling the ice in my chest. I remembered her tears at the hearing her silence in the face of truth. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a park near my place, a public spot where I could walk away if I needed to. The park was quiet, bare trees casting long shadows across the grass. Hannah was already there, sitting on a bench, her coat wrapped tight against the cold. She stood as I approached, her eyes red but dry, her face older than I remembered. She started, her voice soft. I know I don't deserve this, but I'm sorry. I was selfish. I was wrong. Her words were earnest, but they didn't reach me, not anymore. I sat on the bench, keeping distance between us. You took Dad's trust, Hannah. I said, my voice even almost too calm. You forged my name, used my credit. Why? She looked down, her hands twisting together. I thought I could fix things, make life better for all of us, but I got greedy. Her admission was a knife sharp but dull, cutting through the last threads of our bond. I wanted to believe her, but the trust was gone, a hole too deep to fill. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, the motion instinctive. I forgive you. I said the words, surprising me, but I need space. Maybe forever. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, a single tear falling. I stood, my boots crunching on the gravel, and walked away. The park's silence swallowing her quiet sob. Forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me, a way to let go without carrying her guilt. But as I reached my car, the weight of what I'd lost settled in heavy and final, like a door closing I'd never open again. I woke to sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains, a soft gold that felt like a promise. My apartment, once a place I'd barely noticed, was starting to feel like mine again. I'd spent the weekend painting the living room walls a pale blue, the color of a clear sky after rain. Each stroke of the roller had been deliberate, a way to cover the old and start fresh. I hung Dad's letter on the wall, its frame simple but sturdy. His words now a reminder of my strength, not my duty. I sipped coffee at my kitchen table, the quiet of the morning wrapping around me like a blanket. The courthouse. Hannah's tears, Mom's silence, they were still there, but they didn't choke me anymore. I'd started to see myself differently, not as the sister who fixed everything, but as a woman who could choose her own path. That shift, small as it was, felt like a victory. I'd heard about a support group at a community center downtown, a place for people navigating family fallout. On a whim, I decided to go, pulling on a sweater and boots and driving through Cleveland's waking streets. The center was a low brick building, its windows warm with light. Inside, a circle of chairs held a dozen strangers, their faces a mix of weariness and hope. I took a seat, my hands clasped tight, unsure if I belonged. The facilitator, a woman with gray curls and a soft voice, asked us to share what brought us here. When my turn came, I hesitated, then spoke, my voice steady but low. My mom and sister used me for money. I said the words simpler than I'd expected. I'm learning to let go without losing myself. The group nodded, their eyes kind, and a woman across from me, Rachel, smiled faintly. That's the hardest part, she said, finding you again. After the meeting, Rachel caught up with me in the hallway, her scarf bundled against the chill. You said something that hit me, she said, her voice warm. I'm a therapist, and I've been where you are. If you ever want to talk, no charge, just coffee. Her offer was unexpected, a thread of connection I hadn't sought but welcomed. We exchanged numbers, and as I walked to my car, the weight of the morning felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of my pain in that circle. Back home, Sarah texted, insisting I join her for a pottery class she'd found. I laughed, picturing her covered in clay, and agreed, needing something new to fill my days. The studio was a cozy space, filled with the earthy smell of wet clay and the hum of spinning wheels. Sarah was already at a station, her hands shaping a lumpy bowl. Come on, Em, she called, grinning. Make something ugly with me. I sat at the wheel, the clay cool and slick under my fingers. The instructor showed me how to center it, her voice patient as the wheel spun. My first try collapsed a wobbly mess, but I laughed, the sound surprising me. I tried again, guiding the clay upward, forming a small vase, uneven, but mine. Sarah cheered her bowl no better, and for an hour, I forgot the world outside. The vase flawed, as it was felt like a piece of me I'd molded from nothing. That night, I bought a journal, its cover a deep green, and sat on my couch, pen in hand. I wrote about the courthouse, the group, the clay under my nails. I wrote about Dad, not his letter, but his laugh, how he'd hum off key while cooking breakfast. The words flowed not angry or sad, but clear, like I was mapping a new road. I closed the journal, my breath slow, and felt a quiet peace settle in a moment of rest before the next step. I stepped out of my apartment, the morning air crisp, carrying the faint scent of snow. I'd signed up to volunteer at a charity Dad used to support, a small group that helped families rebuild after loss. The community center was bustling, tables piled with donation boxes, volunteers sorting clothes and canned goods. I found my place among them, folding sweaters, my hands moving with a rhythm that felt new. Marcus? My neighbor was there too, stacking boxes with a quiet focus. Didn't know you were into this, I said, smiling. He shrugged, his grin easy. My mom used to volunteer here. Feels good to keep it going. We worked side by side, our conversation light but steady about music, winter plans, the way Cleveland lights up at dusk. His presence was a comfort, not demanding, just there like a steady pulse. I caught myself laughing at his bad jokes, the sound soft but real, a piece of joy I hadn't expected to find. Midway through the day, I slipped away to visit Dad's grave, a short drive to a cemetery lined with bare oaks. The stone was simple, his name etched deep, the dates, a reminder of how fast time slips away. I knelt, brushing leaves from the base, and placed a single flower from my pottery vase, its petals bright against the gray. I'm figuring it out, I said, my voice low, the words for him alone. I think you'd be proud. The wind stirred, and I closed my eyes, feeling him in the quiet, his love a constant I'd never lose. Back at the center, I rejoined the volunteers, my heart fuller. A photo on the wall caught my eye. Dad younger, standing with the charity's founder, both smiling wide. I stared, my throat tightening, and asked a staff member about it. Your dad was a big donor, she said, her voice warm. Helped start our emergency fund. I nodded, a new piece of him settling in me, a legacy I could carry forward, not as a burden, but as a choice. That evening, Sarah invited me to her place for a game night. A small group of her friends gathered around a cluttered table. The room was loud with laughter cards, scattered pizza boxes open. I joined in my competitive streak, surprising even me, teasing Sarah when I won a round of Uno. For the first time in months, I felt light, like I belonged without having to prove it. Their chatter wrapped around me, a warmth I'd forgotten I could feel. Before I left, I pulled out the letter I'd written to Mom, the one I'd poured my heart into weeks ago. I'd carried it in my bag, unsure if I'd ever send it, sitting in my car, the engine off. I read it one last time, my eyes tracing the words of hurt and hope. I folded it carefully and slipped it into an envelope addressing it to her house. I didn't need her to read it, didn't need her apology. Mailing it was for me a way to close a chapter without looking back. I drove home, the city quiet, streetlights casting soft pools of gold. My phone buzzed a text from Hannah asking to come to the charity's fundraiser next week. I stared at it, my heart steady, and didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because I was learning to choose myself. I parked, stepped into my apartment, and stood by the blue wall, Dad's letter glowing in its frame. I breathed slow, the world still, and felt a peace I hadn't known I could claim, a quiet strength to carry me forward. The charity fundraiser was alive with energy, the community hall decked out in string lights and handwritten signs. I stood at a podium, my hands steady on the note cards I'd prepared. The crowd was small but warm, their faces lit with interest as I spoke about the charity's work, about Dad's belief in second chances. He taught me that helping others heals you too. I said, my voice clear, carrying a strength I'd only begun to recognize. This is for him and for all of us finding our way. Applause rippled through the room, soft but real, and I stepped down, my heart full. Marcus caught my eye from across the hall, stacking chairs with that easy grin of his. He'd been there all day, hauling tables, joking with volunteers, his presence a quiet anchor. Nice speech, he said later, handing me a cup of punch. We stood by a window, the glass cool against my shoulder, and talked about nothing important, old movies, the best taco truck in town. His laugh was low grounding, and I felt a flicker of something new, not romance but possibility, like a door left ajar. Natalie found me near the dessert table, her coat slung over her arm. "You were amazing up there," she said, her hug quick but tight. She'd been at the fundraiser all evening, helping with ticket sales, her support unspoken but steady. "I told your mom I'm done with her drama," she whispered, her voice firm. "I'm Team Emily now." I smiled, the words settling like a warm stone in my chest. Her choice felt like a bridge, one I hadn't built, but was grateful to cross. The hall was emptying out, volunteers sweeping up, when I noticed a figure lingering by the back door. Hannah, her scarf loose, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. She didn't approach, just watched, her face a mix of longing and restraint. I held her gaze for a moment, my pulse steady, then turned back to the table arranging leftover flyers. I didn't feel anger or pain, just a quiet resolve to keep my distance. She slipped out the door, clicking shut, and I let her go, the weight of her presence lifting like fog. We raised $10,000 that night, more than I'd hoped. I wrote a check for $5,000 from the trust fund money Lucas had recovered, my signature, deliberate, a nod to Dad's legacy. Back home, I sat on my couch, the green journal open in my lap. I wrote about the fundraiser, the faces in the crowd, the way Marcus's laugh had made me forget to be guarded. I wrote about Natalie's loyalty, Hannah's silent exit, and the peace of choosing my own path. My apartment was still the blue walls, soft in the lamplight. I stood and pulled a photo from my desk drawer, one I'd taken at the pottery studio, my lopsided vase glowing under the glaze. I pinned it to a corkboard next to a grocery list and a concert ticket stub, small markers of a life I was building. The act was simple, but it felt like a promise, a way to say I was here, not just surviving, but living. I turned off the lamp, the room sinking into quiet, and let out a slow breath, the day's warmth lingering like a held hand. The next morning, I woke early, the quiet of my apartment a canvas for new thoughts. I pulled on a coat and walked to a nearby lake, its surface still reflecting the pale dawn. I sat on a bench, my hands wrapped around a thermos of tea, the steam curling in the cool air. The world felt different now, Not because the pain was gone, but because I'd learned to carry it differently. I thought about Mom and Hannah, their choices, their silence, and realized I didn't need their apologies to move forward. I needed me, my own forgiveness, my own strength. I started a new routine, small but deliberate. Each evening, I'd light a candle, its flicker a signal to sit with my thoughts. I'd write in my journal not about loss, but about what I was building, a life where I chose who walked beside me. I called Rachel from the support group, meeting her for coffee, her questions gentle but piercing. "What do you want your life to feel like?" she asked, once her eyes steady. I didn't have an answer then, but I was starting to find it in the quiet moments, in the choices I made to show up for myself. One afternoon, I visited the charity again, dropping off a box of books I'd collected. The director pulled me aside, her smile wide. "We're starting a scholarship in your dad's name," she said, "for kids who've lost a parent. Your donation made it possible." I stood there, my throat tight, picturing Dad's grin, his belief in giving back. The scholarship wasn't just his legacy, it was mine, a way to turn pain into something lasting. I left the center, my steps lighter, the winter sun warm on my face. I began to notice the small joys, the ones I'd overlooked before. The way my neighbor's dog barked at snowflakes, the scent of fresh bread from the bakery down the street, the sound of my own laughter when Sarah dragged me to a trivia night. These weren't grand moments, but they were mine, pieces of a life I was stitching together, thread by thread. I wasn't whole yet, but I was healing, learning that my worth didn't depend on what I gave others, but on what I gave myself. The lesson came slowly, like dawn creeping over the horizon. Family isn't just blood. It's respect. Trust the people who see you and stay. I'd spent years trying to hold Mom and Hannah together, thinking love meant sacrifice, but love starts within. Forgiving them wasn't about erasing the hurt. It was about freeing myself from carrying it. I learned to set boundaries not as walls, but as doors I could open or close. And in that choice, I found a freedom I'd never known, a quiet power to live for me. What's a moment that taught you who you really are? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, to finding our way one step at a time.